I think I should get points for walking up here. So the best that I can do is recite a few limericks. I've been told that I'm the only person that is speaking today that is allowed to chew gum while I speak. So I'm going to chew a few times and then recite this limerick. A gum-chewing girl and a cud-chewing cow are almost the same, yet different somehow. I've thought and I've thought, so I'll tell you now, and the difference, I vow, is the intelligent look on the face of the cow. So I've been told by some of my other family members that other family members now tell this limerick to their children to reprimand them when they are chewing gum. Which I think that Grandpa did do that to me when I was chewing gum, but it wasn't just about that. It was imparting, what a limerick was. Kind of a riddle, because especially for a 7-year-old girl, I didn't know what a cud was. So it means more than just saying, stop chewing gum like a girl with your mouth open, right? It means think a little bit about what you're doing and how you're communicating what you're doing to the world. So I have to apologize to Grandpa first and then everyone else in the room. This is not a limerick, but I did write this. There once was a Dale from Deerfield. A man of charm and humor was revealed. Caught the eye of a witty redhead, and soon they were wed. Made a family of 5 that turned into 13. Sorry, I'm not counting the in-laws, not because you're not part of the family, just because the math gets a little complicated. Laughter and love, limericks and April Fool jokes, humanism, critical thinking, and sometimes a little bit of drinking. These elements of life made worth living. Yet, as time marched on, some of this and them are now gone. But not really, because within all of us, they will forever live on. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mary Ware. I met Dale a little over 2 years ago. Roy and I had been dating just a few months at the time. Seeing Dale and Roy together and the joy they brought to one another made me instantly love Dale and fall more deeply in love with Roy. There was something magical about the entire experience. Dale would sometimes beam when he saw Roy, sometimes not. Yet either way, he would receive a great love from his son. I'm not at all exaggerating when I say that some of the most beautiful and close moments that Roy and I spent together were here with Dale. Eliza, Kayla, Caitlin, and I love Dale. And we have in common knowing him in his later years only and valuing that experience deeply.
My name is Eliza, and I am 9 years old. I was Dale's only great-granddaughter, and I called him Great-Grandpa Willman. I will miss going to Marquette Manor and seeing the smile on his face when he saw children. Often, we would bring my friend Ollie, who my mom babysat, and when we didn't bring him, Great-Grandpa Willman would say, "Where's the other one?" We would sometimes take Great-Grandpa Willman out to this little garden area at Marquette Manor, but only on warm, sunny days. Great-Grandpa Willman also liked to hear stories and see my chalk pictures and blow bubbles and color pictures. I will miss you, Great-Grandpa Willman.
I know from stories that Dale was a deep-thinking man, a man of many words and limericks and songs, and a man of many questions. A man who needed to know how things work and what it means. These are all gifts he gave, a curiosity that was so much a part of his family. Yet what I was privileged to see, and the gift that Dale gave me, was a deep acceptance of life. The beauty of being in his presence was invaluable, and I think Mary and I can both agree that we'll most likely miss the wink.
One more thing we wanted to add is that another joy of us knowing Dale is seeing him with his family, especially the constant love, care, and joy and laughter that you gave him. Magic definitely happened when you all were in the same room. And we miss him dearly.
Hello, so I'm Alfonso. What a tribute for my daughter to talk about her father that way. But as Larry said, words of wisdom. Dale had a lot of words of wisdom. And I was thinking of stories and reflecting back. And so when I first met Beth, we started dating. I remember I come from a very traditional family, and I said, I'm going to ask Dale's acceptance or approval to marry Beth. So, Beth and I were 28 years old at the time. We'd been on our own for a long time. So people did question, why are you asking Dale for Beth's hand in marriage? But being the traditionalist that I am, I said, I'm going to go and ask him for her hand in marriage. So we're sitting at the house on Friar Court in the kitchen, with that kitchen, over that kitchen table that's now at our house. Cuckoo clock in the background, that's now at Roy's house. And the wallpaper, that yellow wallpaper that they had with the brown paneling. And we're sitting there, and I remember starting the conversation with Dale and asking him, Dale, I love your daughter, and I want to marry her. And Dale had that little puzzled look on his face, and his head was cockeyed a little bit, looking at me, questioning. And I knew it was going through his head. Why are you asking me for my daughter's in marriage? She at 18, she left. You don't need her. Beth is independent. She doesn't care if I say yes or no, you're going to marry her. And I could hear Jenny in the background, and maybe I'm making this up here, but I can still hear her in the background in the bedroom saying, listen to him, Dale, listen to him. And so I asked, Dale, and I just asked him, I said, Dale, I would like to marry Beth, and I would like your approval. And he looked at me, and again, I could hear Jenny, say yes, say yes. And he said, are you serious? And I said, yes, I need to hear an answer, a yes or no. And then he reached across and he said, yes. And I said, thank you. The other memory I have of Dale is the first Christmas I spent with the Willman family in the same house there. And this is when I knew I would fit into this family. I remember that. So Beth opened her gift, and it was a big, large package. And Dale made sure he was shaking it, and there was some noise in it, and shaking it. So as Beth opened the package, she opened the first box. Then she opened the second box. Then she opened the third box. And finally, and it was stuffed in there, styrofoam and nuts and bolts and everything else. So when Beth shook it, we're thinking there was some jewelry in it, and out came just a little piece of jewelry for her. And I started laughing. And to this day, ask my children, I do the same thing. I was gifted. I had the best father-in-law in the world. I had the best mother-in-law. And I will miss him dearly.
So I'm Skylar, the one grandson. Everyone remembers different things about my grandpa, whether it was the inquisitive questions, the intellectual conversations, or the limericks. But it's the little things that I'll remember, and the one little thing that I'll always remember is the handshake. The strong handshake will look you in the eyes and know exactly who you are. So it's the handshake that I will always remember by my grandma.
Can I talk?
Yeah.
Please, you've never asked before.
No, it's tricky. No, you're on the list. I think I don't need a microphone.
Go ahead.
I have two things I wanted to say. One is, my dad was in a fraternity when he was at Illinois Institute of Technology. I forget where we went to school. Okay, and he was.
Oh, you think I do need a mic? Oh, that's fun. Anyhow, he was in a fraternity, and he had a fraternity brother that he stayed in contact with. They both went. College was interrupted for both of them when they both went into the Navy, and then he came back and finished school. And they stayed in contact for a while, and then they lost contact, and then Daddy found him again. His name was Ed Hollander. And I'm willing to bet that the family probably never met Ed more than once. Yeah, I think I met him once. I don't think Mom liked him very well, but they just had conversations on the telephone and things like that. Well, I got an email from Ed Hollander's daughter. Ed's still living, and his daughter, as I remember the story, she's in some way disabled and has lived with her parents all of her life. And her mom's now gone, and she's taking care of her dad. And she sent me this email. I can do it. Okay, I only met your father once when we were still in Illinois, so that would have been sometime between kindergarten and second grade. He had dinner with us one night when he was passing through town. We entertained very rarely because of my father's antisocialness. That's one of a handful of times I can remember having dinner guests. He was also the only one of my father's friends from growing up in college I ever met. I remember him as very, very nice, making a point to talk to me and my mother as much as he did my father. He was also a lot of fun. He did some sleight of hand afterward just for me. He gave away a trick when he showed me a jackknife he had used, which had a black side and a white side. And then he gave it to me. I was dumbfounded and enthralled. 15 or 20 years ago, or whenever it was that they reconnected when your father called mine, I was dumbfounded when I answered the phone and a man said, "My name is Dale Willman, is that available?" I would have been dumbfounded in any case, but his timing was beyond extraordinary. That day I had been cleaning out some boxes filled with my oldest treasures, stuff from lower primary grade, stuff I didn't realize I still had. Didn't remember about half of it. Very clearly remembered the other half, including the knife that Mr. Willman gave me. I went in and showed it to my parents. Don't think my father believed me. My mother remembered it clearly. I had held it in my hand for the first time in decades, less than 2 hours before he called. I let out a very loud yelp, "Dale Willman," and told him about the knife. He claimed to remember giving it to me. I must have talked to him several minutes before I bothered to call my father on the phone. I listened a little to their call. It sounded as if they were still in the fraternity house catching up after classes. That was at least 54 years ago. Quite sure that I've never had a dinner guest who made a bigger impression on me. I am so glad that your father tracked my father down. As far as I know, he was one of the 2 or 3 best friends my father ever had. I'm not going to tell my father because either he won't understand or he will, and he'll be very depressed. As it is, he has a hard time consistently remembering that my mother and his parents are dead. My dad was always lousy about expressing his appreciation about anything. I hope your father knew how much my father treasured him. I just thought that was amazing. I think it just shows how the very little things that we do that we don't think will ever touch someone really do. Okay, now I'm going to read this too, and I'm getting for this too. Now I apologize to all the Northeast people that are here, because you're probably going to remember this very clearly, because I read it for a Father's Day thing at Northeast in 1996, and I'm sure that all of you are going to be like, oh my God, not this again. But again, I wrote this in 1996, so just keep that in mind, okay? Mom was still living. I know that after I read it in church, Mom told me, Dad never said anything to me, and Mom told me that all she did was reach across to him and say, it sounds like your daughter knows you pretty well. You know what my daddy always told me about Father's Day? He told me it was a day created by fathers who felt guilty or insecure about the kind of father they were and needed the day of validation and approval. For that reason, celebrating it was unnecessary for him. Now, I could really get into a philosophical discussion with him over this. It would go something like this. He didn't need validation of the kind of father he was because he already knew. And one's own judgment of oneself and one's accomplishments and behavior is the only real judgment that matters. And even if others' opinions did have validity, why would the valid person be the child who, by the very definition of the word, has less credibility, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? It would become a pure word game to see who could bowl the other the most effectively, and for the longest without going completely out on a limb and become the dreaded irrational. Of course, we still had to at least get him a card, or we would have never heard the end of it from Mom. Truth is, I don't really think Dad would have cared if we had just skipped it. This doesn't have to be a tribute to my father, just a conversation about him. That's just as well. Not because I couldn't come up with a way or words to pay tribute, but because he doesn't require it and I don't have a need to provide him with it. The father role was pretty traditional in many ways. He was the provider and drove Girl Scouts and met the guys I dated. When I was a teenager, I hated him. What would make him the angriest was if I upset Mom. I think he always wanted to be the boss. It didn't always work out the way he planned. But there was a line you didn't cross. The father role was not traditional in a couple of important ways. One was the way he raised a female child born in the early 50s. If I have conceptions of male-female equality, it is due in large part to him. There was never a limit on what I could or could not become or do. It was unrelated to being a girl, but entirely related to being a Willman. Because I was a Willman and born of a Willman and of the heritage of a Willman, the sky was the limit. I can appreciate this now, but it might have been too high an expectation at particular points in my life. In any event, when I saw him later in business mentoring women, instead of playing the good old boy game, I understood he would support intellect and integrity over all else. The other untraditional role he played was his reactions to authority. Clearly an authoritative father in his own right, he still questioned all others in roles of authority, from teachers to doctors to ministers. Again, we must trust ourselves and use our own intellects and value systems to reach decisions. I don't remember a big emphasis on grades, whether he meant it or not. My guess is they were the teacher's opinions. Learning was my job, not getting a grade. I say little girls pick men just like their daddies to marry. I didn't. If you know them both, you know they aren't alike in any visible way. But they have more in common than either one of them would like to admit. They are both honest. Bottom line, dead on, target, honest. They are both loyal, comfortable with commitment, and understanding totally what that entails. They both married a little later in life and dedicated themselves to family. They both have pre-marriage history. The story is that my dad had to take a trip around the Upper Peninsula of Michigan just to tell all the women in different towns that he was getting married. I have a feeling there are pieces of his history I will never know. I pointed to places in his bald spot, and each place had a different story that he could make up. A born storyteller and joke teller and word user. My dad is a card-carrying genius, an intellectually curious person who doesn't share emotion easily. Cynical and suspicious at times, conservative and open-minded, bossy and fiercely independent, angry and critical of himself, willing to pursue self-growth and never wearies of reading. Remember, these are just my perceptions, totally invalid. He's also possibly the most irritating person I have ever known. He can hurt my feelings whenever he feels like it. I still care what he thinks of me, and I can't always figure out where I stand. My only defense is to keep him guessing too.